Great. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the second episode of our College Admissions Tips to Success podcast series. With me today, we have the wonderful Brianna.
Hey,
I always mispronounce her last name. I hope that's not going to be a theme in these episodes, but please,
you got it.
if you want to introduce yourself really briefly.
Yeah, my name's Brianna Dolly. I also go by Bree a lot. I am one of the VOT College Admissions and GSE Board Ambassadors. I'm from a small town in Minnesota, but I now attend Vanderbilt University. I am a rising junior, and I'm studying theater on the pre-medical track with minors in chemistry and anthropology.
Wonderful. And I mean, we have done our first episode in case any of our viewers haven't watched that. Definitely take a look at that. It's a good intro before we get into this week's episode. My name is Ishaan Chabi. I am the founder of GSE and its subsidiaries. Love that. I also am an alumni from Vanderbilt University. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I graduated in fall of 2024. I double majored in molecular and cellular biology and medicine, health, and society. Quite a wordful for majors, but it is what it is. And then right now, I am a Dean's Scholar, and I'll be attending the Quillen College of Medicine for my MD degree. So that is a bit about me. The second episode is going to focus on the written materials for the college admissions process. And really, like, these episodes that we have now are going to kind of like this episode and the next few episodes are going to really dig deep into the individual elements of the college admissions process. We'll talk about obviously the written materials include like our Common App essay, the supplemental essays that you have for each individual college, and then, of course, a few general tips and also the timeline for how you want to get these essays done. There is also one more section we'll cover, which is the additional info section that you see in many of the application systems. Once again, I would recommend to review the first episode where we sort of talk about the different application systems that exist. But for this episode, we're going to go into Common App, Coalition, and QuestBridge. That's sort of what we mainly cover in this series. So Breed, let's maybe get started with why are the written materials so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the biggest things with these essays is typically, especially when you're applying to higher caliber schools, a lot of the applicants are going to look very similar. You're all going to have very similar GPAs, ACT. Also, you'll have a variety of extracurriculars that define each person, but everyone still has roughly the same amount, similar achievements in all of those extracurriculars. So, the essays and any of these written materials that we talk about are really when admissions officers get to see who you are as a person. They are what sets you apart from your statistics and from other students. You really want to make sure that these materials are giving the admissions officers a deeper look into who you are. That's considered like the human part of your application. And this is especially important because you don't meet your admissions officer. At this point, you are very much just a bunch of statistics on a page. So you want to show them why are you a fit for this school and also why are you interested in this school in the first place.
And certainly, I would also add in here as well that like the essays do in many ways, many people do say this, like you'll hear many other college admissions counselors say this, but the essays are a huge portion in terms of the weightage when it comes to gaining admission into your desired university. As Bree mentioned, this is the persona aspect of your application. So you definitely don't want to uh, take this lightly at all. So the essays, I would say it's a very crucial part of your application. And I guess we can slowly gradually move into now the different systems. So like the Common App essay, but also just the Common Essay in general. My bad there. So the Common Essay we call it the Common Essay, but it's basically your central essay that is very key to describing who you are as a person and why you're basically trying to get into, or like you want to show your personality. Like this is the essay that you'll see that's a very central part of your application. For the Common App, it's a 250 to 650 word requirement, and for the Coalition app, it's 500 to 650 words. As I mentioned, this is the general essay that's submitted to all the schools. So this essay, I would say, is like you have to take a lot of time to really make sure that all the ideas discussed in this essay are very carefully and thoughtfully presented. The prompts for these essays, for this common essay, for either the Common App, Coalition app, and even the Quest Bridge, they can all be found online. So that's one of the best elements of this is that you can prepare for writing these essays well in advance, even before the application portals open up themselves. And really, a few key goals with the common essay is you again want to show your voice, but you really want to show yourself in a way that you are basically presenting yourself to someone who has never met you, who has never actually engaged with you. And this essay basically should be written in a way where you're really like if someone were to read it they understand who you are as a person and like they completely get a gauge of how you might be a good fit perhaps, I mean personality wise, character wise, into the university that they're looking to admit you in. So a few things to remember, obviously you want to tell an engaging story while integrating some personal attributes and traits about yourself. This is really, as we say, to really showcase yourself. If you can use an engaging hook, that's even better because you can really try to reel your admissions officers in and sort of get them to at least be interested in further reading your essay. You also want to avoid going down your typical college essay cliches. You really want to make it seem individualistic because you don't, and I would even add one more thing, like nowadays we also have AI and all these different tools. My personal advice is just to sort of use the style that's individual to you. AI at the end of the day is gaining it. AI produces responses based off of data that people put in. So it's like you'll get a very generalized form there. So if you can use a voice that's very custom and tailored to you, that's only helping your chances for really making a really personal, common essay that these colleges can really look at meaningfully. And also, one more point, which I think it is a point that many people sometimes forget, but the common essay is a common essay, as the name implies. So you don't want to put any names for any universities. You want to keep it very generic. But again, the essay should focus on you, but there should not be any names for any other colleges in this essay. Bree, did you want to add anything else to this by chance?
Yeah, I was gonna just say, I think it's really important to, like you said, use your own narrative voice. As I've reviewed not college application essays, but like scholarship applications before, and I think what really catches me when I'm reading is just like a someone's really personal narrative style is what draws me into the essay. If someone writes in a way where they're just kind of listing what they did and not really elaborating or just not really talking about it in a very personal way, it automatically kind of turns me off of their essay, even if they have really good content. So I do think taking the time to write in a personal style. And on top of that, this essay, you only have to write once. You write it, you can put it on your common essay, your coalition, and it is just submitted to all of the schools you submit to. So you only have to write it once, but I do also recommend editing periodically. Just your first edit before you submit it, and then also editing it as you come up with new ideas. I had a point where I was like, actually, I have a better way to end this essay. So I just resubmitted it to any of my additional schools I was still submitting to with that new ending that I liked better. But definitely, I think it's very worth putting your time and effort into this essay.
Yeah, and this essay, I mean, as Brie mentioned, it is definitely one of the things that it is a very key element to your application, and it is definitely not something you want to rush at all. We will get into timeline, into specifics as to when you should get things started, but out of all the essays, we have to say this essay is one of the ones you really should get well in advance started with, and also have multiple rounds of revision, as Bree mentioned, just so that you can really um, set yourself out there in the best way possible. And then I'll let you take some other points here as well.
Yeah. So it is quite overwhelming to get started writing this essay, especially if you're not someone who typically writes in a narrative style. Like, I am a very academic writer. I write a lot of research papers and like rhetorical writing. I'm not someone who writes creatively very often. So I think getting started was very nerve-wracking for me. And I wasn't really sure what to talk about. So I think one of the biggest thing, the easiest ways you could start is sit down and just look at the prompts. These are online, they can be easily found, and they will also be able to be found in your application portal once that application cycle opens on August 1st. So when you go through these prompts, there's most of them are narrative based, but there is also one prompt that says share an essay on the topic of your choice. Usually will ask for one that you already have written. Typically, we find that this prompt is best to avoid as it is something that usually isn't super personal, especially if you're just sharing an old like research paper. So avoid that for the most part, unless you're desperate for time or happen to have some really, really good material and you do feel it shows your best self. Otherwise, a lot of the prompts are very similar, so it can also be hard to figure out like which prompt do I use if I have a story that could fit multiple prompts. So what I did is I sat down and I just kind of like brainstormed for each prompt, like what in my personal life relates to this prompt. I immediately was able to throw away some prompts that I was like, these just don't relate to me. They don't make sense for me. They aren't something I feel I'm equipped to write on. But then I also found a couple prompts that I was like, I have multiple stories that fits this. I feel very passionate about what I'm talking about for these. So maybe start gravitating towards those prompts. And I also think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Continue. Sorry, my
I
bad.
was just going to say, also don't be afraid to shy away from prompts that you think are like too big or too hard to write about, because I do think that those prompts can end up being some of your most valuable tools. So really take time to just brainstorm and come up with ideas for each prompt.
And just sort of echoing that sentiment, I also will say that with each of the prompts, like when you are brainstorming, you do want to see how much, like, of course, prompts where you can really talk about either like an impact factor, I would say. So, like somebody who has either made an impact on you, you may have done like that is like obviously you can look at the individual prompts and you'll see like what ideas you can sort of gravitate and resonate towards in terms of brainstorming. But typically, the best stories that we do like that we do see in the college admissions like common essay oftentimes rely on this sort of idea of like an impact. So if somebody impacted you, or if you did something that made a tremendous impact on others, and like obviously you don't want it to be about too much on someone else. You want to stay focused on yourself in this process and how you are growing as a person as well. But I would say that overall, you do want to like that impact element is something that we've noticed is a good theme in terms of a very strong common essay. And as we move into some of like we'll discuss some of the prompts as well. So we'll go over that. As I said before, these are prompts that actually, as Bree and I both mentioned, these are prompts that you can definitely find online. So it's not something that we have a hidden secret here. But I will say that one of the big prompts that we do recommend everyone to avoid, and this is both present in the Common App essay and also in the Common App Common Essay and the Coalition App Common Essay, is really this last prompt, which is share an essay on any topic of your choice. And it can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. And then the Coalition app has just submit an essay on a topic of your choice. So both of these, like the prompts here specifically of just share an essay on any topic of your choice, or just submit any essay. These prompts are really tricky because in many ways, it may seem like you can just submit anything and go forward with it. But as we mentioned before, a very key element of this common essay is to try to showcase yourself. And then, of course, as we mentioned a little bit before about like this idea of an impact. So, in terms of how can you truly make a difference, or how has someone made a difference on you, and how you have you grown in the process? These are some of the themes that you definitely want to highlight in your essay while simultaneously incorporating your meaningful experiences. So, like, I can say in my case, this was a while ago, as I mentioned in my bio, but when I was applying to colleges, it was the pandemic period. And at that time, obviously, the pandemic was one of the big challenges of the world. So, at that time, and that's sort of the origin story for this nonprofit, funny enough. But apparently, it was a time where I saw like, oh, there's an issue, like tutoring is an issue in the pandemic. So I created a tutoring group, and then I sort of like used that as one of the key core experiences to show how I identified a problem and then how I was able to grow myself as a result of it, showcase my attribute in terms of serving others in periods of great distress. So, like, that's sort of an idea as an example as to what you can sort of revolve around, or something where you're making a huge impact. And it can be daunting to think about, which is why Bree, when she mentioned the idea of brainstorming, it's definitely a good idea to just sort of take some time to sort of just think through what experiences you can highlight, or what experience is most valuable as a means to write your common essay. Now, there are a few other prompts here which we can cover as well. So, like, one of the prompts here is about like some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is very meaningful that they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. So this prompt is something along the lines of like, if you have something that's very core to your identity, whether it be your ethnic background, racial background, sexual orientation, anything that you feel is very core to your persona, personality, or yourself, this is a good prompt for that, for those kinds of students. I will say that it is also one where like you definitely, again, you're highlighting the importance of this, of these themes, but you obviously want to ensure that um, you are also highlighting something where you can sort of, I would personally recommend maybe extrapolating your identity to a point where it's making an impact on others. Like that would be a good way to do it. That's my take on it, but yeah. But there's a few other prompts here as well. Bree, if you want to look at the second or the next few
Yeah,
prompts.
I'd love to. And on that note, I think one of the biggest things just to say is write in a way that makes your work not passive. So with any of these prompts, like as you said, like find a way to talk about an impact that either you made or like some personal growth that you developed. So don't write in a way that is just listing or talking about experience. Talk about how that changed you or how that led you to change the world around you. So something that I wrote, I actually wrote my essay on the second prompt for the Common App essay. It reads, or it kind of just talks about like recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from that experience? So I think also with this, I should preface with it can be very daunting to try to think of something you did that was very big, especially if you don't have something like that. Like, I personally did not have any really huge experience. I was very involved in a lot of extracurriculars, but because I'm from such a small town, there just wasn't really much I could do. So I wrote about something that, in my mind and on paper, looks very small, but actually in my personal life left a very big impact on me. So I wrote about how I grew up queer in a small town that just was not open to that identity, and how I kind of used that and used my own personality to connect with people and kind of educate people on like, here's what it is to be queer, and here's why it's okay to accept us as people. I also organized a group to provide like younger queer students with mentorship within the high school. I got gender neutral bathrooms assigned. I also got like some different like books in our education system to highlight these queer identities. So while on paper that wasn't really something I could put down as like an extracurricular, it was still something I did that was really meaningful to me as a person. So that's what I wrote about.
And as we say here, and like it's definitely like this essay specifically, the common essay, it's a very personal essay in nature. So like Bree mentioned her anecdote, I mentioned mine. So every person who's listening to this, they'll have a story that is very personal to them, which they can definitely extrapolate and really flesh out basically for the purposes of the essay. I do think for the interests of time, like there's a lot of prompts in here, so we do highly recommend um like every viewer, every audience member here to take a look. Literally, quite literally, if you can just search up common app essay prompts and you'll have your common essay prompts. And I will say the same for the Coalition app as well. There's a lot of similarities between the common app essay prompts and the Coalition app essay prompts. Um, Bree, did you actually do a Coalition app essay prompt
I
or?
did. So I hit the limit. Common App has a limit of 20 schools you can apply to, and I hit that limit and exceeded it, which I don't recommend doing, but I
Mhm.
did. Um, and so I literally just took my Common App essay, which I wrote first because I did not originally intend to go over the 20 college limit, and I copy and pasted it, made some minor edits just to kind of refit the prompt and submitted it just as it was.
And that's what I think if I actually I think I literally quite literally copied and pasted my entire essay. And maybe I may have made like a revision or two, but it was mostly the same essay. And as I said, like you can search this up, Coalition app essay prompts. But if you look on Google, you'll see that like there's one prompt here as an example for the Coalition app, which is tell a story from your life, describing an experience that either demonstrates your character or helped to shape it. So like you can imagine, like obviously you can like if I were to adapt my um nonprofit essay that I did for my Common App, I could literally just talk about maybe like that could be one of like I could adapt that essay into something. Or I mean, there's a lot of different prompts here. I'm not going to go into details, but there is you can you can really just use the same essay that you have chosen from your Common App, but you just want to make sure that whatever essay you are translating into the Coalition app, it does address the prompt. That is the other thing. So you don't want to just blindly just copy and paste. It's a good idea to always make sure that whatever prompt you do choose, if you're translating from one portal to another, it is fulfilling the ideas of the prompt. Bree, did you want to add anything more for Coalition app or
I think we're all good on those.
that's good? All right, so do you want to go over QuestBridge really quickly?
Yeah, I can. So QuestBridge is mostly the same. They have very similar prompts, but they have less like options, and also slightly different essay requirements. So you will write two full-length essays, which are 800 words. You'll write a personal slash like biographical essay, which is like just very similar to the prompts we went over. It was kind of just a general like tell me about yourself and your academic life. It's a little bit more aimed towards the QuestBridge applicants, which usually come from a background that doesn't have as strong of access to some of the resources that others might have. So it is kind of asking to elaborate on that a bit more. And then you'll also write a topical essay, which they have three prompts. These are all posted once again. It's about 400 words. And again, these are roughly the same as the other Common App and Coalition prompts. And then otherwise, there's just some short, like I think there's some 400 word characters and some 35 word um, short prompts. These are all actually quite fun, but I also think they can carry a lot of impact. Like just some examples I pulled that are 35 words long, so very short, like a couple sentences. What's your favorite subject and why? Who is a source of inspiration and how do you spend a typical weekend? So while these may seem like kind of nothing questions, I do think at the same time, if you're really thoughtful about how you're responding to these and you're tying these to something that you're really passionate about, something that strongly impacts you, or just something you're really interested in, these do still carry a lot of weight.
And I don't have much to add since I personally like I didn't engage with the QuestBridge essay prompts, but I will say like and you will like I will say there are some supplemental essay prompts which we're not we'll discuss in a minute actually, but the QuestBridge essay prompts, like many, like the short answer ones that you mentioned, Bree, just now, like the 35 word questions, like it, again, really the purpose of these prompts overall, you have to remember, is they're trying to gauge a sense of who you are as a person, your personality, your charisma, character, everything like that. So it's a lot of these questions that you'll see in all these common essays, like whether it be Common App Coalition or QuestBridge. It's this theme of you as a person. So you definitely like again. I mean, I feel like we're sort of a broken record at this point, right? But just to sort of just take some time to really think and reflect as to what situations, um, scenarios, what experiences have been most influential so that you can best address each of these prompts that you're addressing. And I will mention this also really quickly. We are probably going to link all, actually, not even link. We're probably just going to copy and paste these prompts in our video description. So for anybody who's trying to follow along in this podcast episode, they can sort of look at um, the description of this video on YouTube, and they'll all be listed there. So that's good for anybody who's just trying to follow along here. I think we have covered a lot of the common essays. We have covered quite a bit. I will say we also, both Bree and I we have a college admissions counseling, like we have it in GSE, but we have a college admissions counseling service that students can sign up for if they want more personalized, individualized help. And that is also available. We have a little short video at the end that we include at the end of these episodes, which talks about how you can sign up for one of those sessions. But if you do need any help, we are always here to assist and counsel and advise as well. So I think we've covered a bunch of the common essays. I think we'll move into the next section, which is also a very common theme across all the portals. So Common App, Coalition App, and I think QuestBridge perhaps is.
Crossbridge does, yes.
So this is the additional information section, in other words. And really, the additional info section is a chance to really explain specific elements of your application. So additional info, it's a very broad section, as the name sort of can imply, but here you can elaborate on specific extracurriculars or awards that are really, really important, and it has to be very significant in general. You can also explain any personal or family matters that might have impacted your education, your overall progression, and anything that was really a huge commitment, especially in your high school years. I will say when I was applying to colleges, I used this section to talk about what activities of mine got canceled as a consequence of the pandemic. So, like for example, I was supposed to go to Washington, D.C. and go to Congress actually as part of a youth leadership program, but that got canceled, unfortunately, because of the pandemic. So, this is a chance for you to explain things like that. Now, this is not a place for you to just like we do have, obviously we're going to talk about this section in another episode, but there is an activities and awards section like in your application portals. Like you have the Common App has that, Coalition, and even QuestBridge. So this is not a place for you to just add on anything you might have missed in those sections. This is a section where you talk about things that are very deeply impactful, whether they were like family matters, personal matters, or even activities that really had a huge role as a whole. Like you want to list very significant items if you are choosing to discuss any extracurriculars. You don't want to just list minorly significant extracurriculars that had some partial role in your high school career. And overall, this is also not an essay, so you don't want to write this out as like a huge paragraph and paragraph. This is more like a list with brief descriptions. And really, this is just a section where you're giving additional information, as the name says, that would give admissions officers a much clearer idea and about you or the situation in which you have sort of surrounded yourself in. Or not you've surrounded yourself in, or you've been surrounded in, I should say, semantics. Do you have anything else you want to add really quickly, Bree, for this?
I was just going to provide some examples because I know this section can feel very open-ended and you might not really know what to put in it. But I do think that was a very wonderful description that really sums up what the section should look like. So just like for example, for like personal items, colleges do want to see if you have personal commitments that aren't necessarily activities. So like freshman and sophomore year, which is COVID for me, I was a primary caregiver for both my siblings because my parents were full-time physicians. So they were perpetually at work. So while doing my own distance learning and also facilitating my siblings' distance learning and cooking and all of the commitments that come with being like kind of a third parent, I was not able to take on very many extracurriculars. So that's an example of like one of those personal things that might have impacted your academic journey, whether it was grades or extracurriculars that you should mention. Otherwise, as for like additional activities, I know like the awards section is pretty short. I think they only give you 5 spaces to talk about awards. Yeah, but I had a couple others that were very significant that I was like, I don't have room, but I do want to include them. So that was where I put them.
And yeah, and so again, if it's super significant in nature, definitely great to put that in there. But really, what we do mean to say is like if you just have like, for example, I used to volunteer an hour a day, not an hour a day, but like I used to volunteer. Sorry, give me one moment. Sorry about that. So if you used to volunteer like 1 hour a day at a shelter, which maybe you even left in between and then you maybe joined again. Like basically that would be an instance where it's something you were like engaged with, but you didn't necessarily like have something where you were really like unless it was super influential on you as a person or on you in terms of your service towards others. If that's not really the case, then maybe not, it's not the best idea to just list that as almost like as a I can't think of the right word here, but you don't want to just list it endlessly in this section. You want to sort of ensure that whatever activities or whatever experiences you are elaborating upon, they are experiences that have deep impact or deep significance. So as Bree mentioned, it can be personal. It can also be like those awards that you mentioned as well, where it is something you want to share that has immense impact. I guess we can now sort of transition into the next key, I guess, written material, which would be your supplemental essays, which Bree and I know. I mean, these essays, they can be, I won't say they're not necessarily like the common essay is like your one big essay, right? These essays are smaller in nature, but they can be sometimes long. Not because some universities just love to really gain more insight through long prompts. So there's a lot of variety and scope here. So lengthwise, you might have a few characters. Some essay prompts, typically you'll see a lot of 100 to 250 word short essays, but in some unique cases, it can be up 250 to 650 words. I think I was applying to Harvard or somewhere, I don't remember, it was some very top tier Ivy school where essentially like it was almost like up to 800 words for their supplemental essay. So you do see some variety. So I wouldn't use our word limits. Like I wouldn't stick to that as the core here. But and then also quantity wise. So some schools may have like one or two supplemental essays, whereas other schools might have up to eight, but like eight really small prompts or two really huge prompts, or it can be a mix and match. So there's a lot of variety here, in other words. But what are your supplemental essays? They're the essays where you're really digging deep into why you want to attend that specific university that you're applying to. So it's your school specific essays. So the common essay was generic. This is your individual school specific essays. The prompts are typically released by each individual school. I don't know if they necessarily release the prompts in advance. I think it's something you sort of find out as you go along in the process. So you sort of can prepare a little bit for it, but you do have to be willing to adapt and adjust in real time because some schools like to also change the supplemental essay prompts year to year. So it's not like you can use the same prompts from last year into this year. It doesn't work like that. And as I mentioned really briefly, these are essays that you sort of work along with in the process. So after you submit your common application, many schools will oftentimes send you a link that invites you into their school-specific application. And that school-specific application will have the supplemental essay prompts listed as well as like a checklist of what materials the school needs before like they can formally start considering you for admission. That's sort of just an overall high, I can't think of the word, but overarching high-ended view of the supplemental essays. Do you want to go into content, Bree, as to what
Yeah,
the supplemental?
absolutely. So once you submit your common essay and kind of just common application, whether it's through the Common App or the Coalition, like Ishan said, you will get like a link that will take you to these prompts for the school. And so typically, what we see most often is a couple different types of essays. They're quite similar between schools. So, on top of that, we also recommend keeping all of your essays and being able to copy, paste, and adapt for each school. Just make sure you don't copy, paste, and submit with the name of the old school in there still. Do
That's
not do that.
yeah.
But I kept like a document with all of my essays so that I could copy paste and reuse essays because a lot of times you'll get very similar themes. So some of the themes you'll get, the most common one is the why us essay. It is the school asking you, why do you want to go here? It's, I think almost every school will have this prompt. So definitely be prepared to write about it. Essentially, what they're really looking for is that you have engaged with this school and you know what they're about. So even if you haven't toured, which is okay, at least having done enough research on the school to talk about maybe a specific program that you're really interested, their mission that you just feel really fulfills what you're looking for in a university. Have you spoken to a student that went to the school who talked about specific experiences? And I also think taking, especially if you have a longer word count, relating your specific interest in the school to something in high school as well to continue elaborating on yourself. Like for example, I talked about actually in my Vanderbilt essay, which I'm here now, so that's wonderful. It did something right. Vanderbilt really prioritizes their arts and sciences education. They were the only school in which I could be both pre-med and a theater major, which was absolutely like my biggest goal. Throughout high school, I did everything in medicine and I also did everything in theater. And I did not want to have to give either of them up for college. So I wrote about the way that Vanderbilt specifically fulfills that double major that I really wanted. Oh, go ahead.
No, no, yeah. So I was just gonna say to add on here really quickly, the Why Us essay is, I will, as Bree, it is the essay you'll see with almost every college, at least here in the US for sure. Now, the one thing I will say with the YS essay is sometimes these prompts may not be so direct in how they ask the question why like why I mean why Vanderbilt maybe like some schools might be very direct, others like I know I think I'm not, this might have changed, but while I was applying I think it was Cornell actually that asked
Mhm.
like why is like I think it was very indirect. It was like why do you feel that the like Ithaca is some like it was actually more about the place than it was about the
Mm,
university. So sometimes it's like it's very tricky because some of these prompts they like to mix and match different elements of like of course why the school, but also why the place or why the region sometimes can even be a thing. I remember back when I was applying. So the only thing we would say is when you are doing these why essays, of course, as Bree, everything that Bree mentioned, I completely echo that, which is you want to make sure you have a very due diligence in terms of researching why you want to attend that school, relating experiences whenever possible from high school into college. Anything that shows continuity is obviously a very great thing for any college admissions officer, because it shows you're very much invested in those activities and in that goal. And then, of course, making sure you align yourself with the goals of the school. So, with Vanderbilt, as you mentioned, the arts and sciences priority is something that um, the school prioritizes. And if you prioritize that in your own education, you sort of showcase how you're a good fit for that school. And that's going to be another variation. Why are you a good fit for the university? So there is so many variations of this prompt in terms of semantics, but the theme here is consistent, which is why do you want to attend the university? And that's pretty much all I have to add for that specific prompt. I will say just to be very careful when you're reading the prompts and making sure that if there are any additional elements, like as I mentioned, like why this place or why this region, just make sure you are addressing those points as well, just so that you are in good coverage for that prompt. Because schools do sometimes like you'll be surprised. A lot of schools, I think, I don't remember who told me this, but I think maybe it was an admissions officer, but they are able to tell when a student copies and pastes the same essay across different schools. And the only
Mhm.
difference being that they took the school name out and just replaced it with the other school. It's something that's easy, but remember, shortcuts can be detected pretty quickly nowadays, whether it be through detection software or whatnot. So the only thing I would say is like when you are writing these essays, if you can tailor it to specific elements of the school itself, whether that be like I mentioned, I remember when I was writing my supplemental essays, I talked about specific professors I want to work with for like research, for example. And so, or even clubs that align with the clubs that I'm doing right now. So these are things you want to make sure you can show. It's a very, like, you don't want admissions officers to have the impression that you are literally just copying and pasting across schools. You want to make sure that
Mhm.
each essay that's written for the Why Us is it gives the impression that you have done your research and you're not taking shortcuts there. So that's just one thing I have to add there for that prompt. Then really like the next one here is the more about you prompt, which um, these prompts, there's a lot of variety as I've mentioned before. This is more like, as the name sort of implies, it's more about the admissions office trying to learn about you. So a little bit more extra context outside of the common essay that they have. So, like I mentioned a little bit before in the episode about like those very short prompts, like those 35-word prompts, as tell us about a favorite activity or tell us what you like to do for fun. Sometimes that might be a prompt and for a supplemental essay. And so it's just trying to gauge a sense of how you are, like what do you like to do? Just it's more about you, pretty much. You do want to avoid repetition. That's sort of going to be a theme across all the essays, is you want each essay to provide a unique perspective about you. So they get a very holistic understanding about you as a whole. Um, and of course, the prompts, as I mentioned, it can range from like, tell us about your favorite extracurricular, or tell us about what you're thankful in life. So there's a lot of variety when it comes to these prompts as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add really quickly for this essay?
I was just gonna kind of repeat your idea of repetition that when you're writing these essays, the biggest, first of all, make sure you don't repeat the concept of your Common App. Remember that you did submit that because there were some where I submitted the Common App and did not submit my supplemental until way later. And I realized halfway through I was writing basically the same thing.
Mhm.
So make sure you're not repeating your Common App first and foremost, but then also keep track of what you're writing about, especially if they have multiple prompts. Make sure you're writing about something different because you're wanting to give the admissions officers as much information about you as possible and as broad of a view of your personality as possible.
And and I think, and you'll see this, I mean, we have our podcast series, but any presentation that you go to for any college admissions panel across the country, they'll all likely use the term holistic admission. And that's a very key phrase you have to really understand because holistic admission means that each perspective that is in the application provides a unique aspect or gives a unique perspective about you as an applicant into their medical school. So it's like many parts of a whole, like a pizza, basically.
Mhm.
So like, I mean, obviously, this I would say is like obviously your essays I would say like I would from that pizza pie analogy. I don't know why that's on my mind, even though we have lunch. It's like 75. I would say it's like almost 60% of your applic like if you get into a school, 60% of that can be attributed just to your essays alone, typically, because that is like the supplemental essays, as I mentioned, or as we both mentioned, are like they're giving you the individual, it's giving your individual purpose as to why you want to come to the school. And then obviously, all the other essays we've talked about as well, they each give a unique aspect or a unique insight. That's the word I've been trying to find about you. So that's pretty much the main idea here. There is one more common theme for supplemental essays, which is the extracurricular activity supplemental essay. And that essentially, I think I kind of touched on it a little bit before on the more about you, but it's basically tell us about an extracurricular activity that has either significantly contributed to the community or how do you envision one of your extracurriculars to help the college community itself? So like these are two similar variations, but slightly different, of course. But these are sort of these are essays where you sort of really zone in on one specific activity and then just showcase how that connects to one of the activities present on the college campus or something that maybe an activity that I would actually recommend. One additional tip here is if you can understand the mission of the college as a whole, like for example, I think Georgetown, if I'm not wrong, has the principle of Jesuit education, which is basically they are very big believers in service to the community, very passionate, open service to the community. So if there's an activity that sort of showcases that element of the school's mission, that could be a good fit for like a Georgetown supplemental essay if they ask about an extracurricular activity because you want to showcase the fit to the school in terms of the activities you're engaging in and how you also are aligning yourself with that mission. I think that's pretty much where I was going for, but that's actually a good example, the Georgetown one, because I think they're one of the few schools in the country that has that sort of mission in play. But yeah,
Absolutely.
did you have anything you wanted to add for that extracurricular activity essay?
I think I'm set on that one. But I can move us into just kind of some general advice for tackling these essays because there are a lot of them, especially if you're applying to many schools. They can pile up very quickly. So again, make sure you're starting, get your Common App essay out of the way as early as possible because that's what unlocks these essays. But once you have that done, really move on to writing these essays because they can take a lot of time, especially because there's a high volume. So one of my biggest recommendations is I kept a document, just like a Google Doc, with all of like I had headers as like the school, and then I'd copy paste the prompts underneath it, meaning I could work on multiple prompts throughout the day because sometimes you start one, maybe get a little bit of writer's block, so you move to a different prompt, and then you think of an idea for that one. So I found it helpful to kind of bounce between some of these prompts so I don't get stuck just writing the same prompt. I also think on top of that, reusing concepts from your essay is really helpful. If you can copy paste a good amount of an essay, I think that's a good idea, but I don't think you should copy paste and just leave as is
Mhm.
because that will feel very impersonal. I think it's important to, while you can absolutely copy paste a lot of your writing or copy paste some of the sentences, or just simply move the idea and adapt it into a new prompt, I also think on top of that, it's important to, rather than just swapping out the college names, sitting down and really thinking about how can I make this essay I previously wrote fit this prompt? How can I readapt maybe the intro and the conclusion or some of the interluding sentences to really fit this prompt as opposed to just kind of fitting this prompt? So if you are copy pasting, definitely be careful of that, but I do think it's worth a time saver.
No, for sure. And I think like Definitely, like, I mean, I think we've touched on this idea now at this point a few times, but you just want to make sure that each essay you're writing has the amount of effort that you want to display to the admissions committee. Like, you want to show that you're putting effort into these essays because it is like, of course, I do think that when you are copying and pasting, reusing, it is important. I mean, it is important to do that because I'll be honest, realistically, it's probably not something you could like the volume of essays you get presented with. It's definitely not something you can you have to reuse. I think there's not really
Absolutely.
much of a choice there. But the big thing with reusing is you just want to make sure it's done very diligently, thoughtfully, and carefully so that in this way you don't have like again you don't make mistakes like keeping the same like a different school's name into an essay for another school, but it also ensures that you are putting the amount of time and effort, which really does make a difference, especially in improved outcomes when you're trying to get into like some of your top tier colleges or even just any college in general. So that's that. I think we'll move into the timeline now, which I guess the big point here is you just start all your essays early. So whenever you have a chance, especially for your common essays. So whether that's Common App, Coalition App, or QuestBridge, get that you need to set some time apart and just start brainstorming and just getting that process started. That essay, I will say, is probably going to be I personally think it's one of your biggest time consumers because you really want to thoughtfully present that essay to the admissions committees because that is the first impression that all the colleges
Mhm.
are going to get about you as a person. But then, of course, that's also true whenever you have the time, once that essay is set and sorted, that's when you start to think about your supplemental essays. And I mean, you can find, again, many of the supplemental essay prompts online. It is something you can find. The only thing that we would advise here is that prompts are always subject to change for supplemental
Mhm.
essays. So, like some prompts might be pretty consistent. So like for example, the why like we presented some of those prompts today, which like we covered the why us prompt, the extracurricular activity prompt, and then even the more about you prompt. But these are like some of the common themes that you'll see across schools, but you obviously want to be ready to adapt, revise, and just be willing to just do multiple revisions of the essays, whether that's a peer review, you individually reviewing your essays. You just want to make sure that you have enough time to brainstorm, write, and revise, I would say. Obviously, with time, you always want to make sure it's being used responsibly. Try not to save things for the end because that's not going to produce the best outcomes typically. So it's always a good idea to just get started on this process as early as possible and have the necessary amount of time to budget accordingly for brainstorming, writing, and then reviewing and revising.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say also on that, these prompts will be posted in August. So if you can get a lot of these done before you start the high school year again, I think that'll be very helpful because you never know how busy you're going to get. I finished my Common App by the time I started school, but I hadn't started on these supplemental essays, and a lot of them ended up needing to wait till the last minute because I got so busy during the school year.
Mhm. And yeah, like typically I can't see my time was different because I was in a pandemic period. So it's like I don't have much to say, but the common idea here is like get us started as early as possible. And I mean, if you do encounter writer's block, which is a very real phenomenon, sometimes, I mean, I think the biggest tip we do have, especially as we're sort of winding down this episode, which is that the biggest point here is to stay organized through this whole
Mhm.
process. It's a theme that we mentioned in our first episode. We'll bring it back here in this episode. For your essays, whether it be organizing which prompts are for which schools, sort of brainstorming your ideas, everything needs to be very well organized. Because I will say in my own process, what I did was I mean, I had a bunch of folders I on my computer, each folder corresponding to a college. And then I also had a spreadsheet where I sort of listed every college and the prompts and everything. So it's the biggest, everyone has a different way in how they stay organized. So we're not going to give too many tips there. But I will say the big thing here is to stay organized and stay very um, organized and stay very time efficient. So, like, whatever time you are given, if you have some off time from one of your extracurricular activities, it's a pretty good idea to just maybe take a casual look to see if there's a prompt or something. You can just always continually brainstorm. There's no limit to that. So, writing is when you have to really set that time aside. But if you have a good number of ideas as to as to where you want to get your essays or as to which essay prompt fits the best, whether that's for your common essay or even for your supplemental essays, if you have an idea and you've done your research for the schools, you just want to make sure that you are budgeting your time very appropriately and you're staying very organized throughout this process because that is the key, I would say, to success, especially in the college admissions process. I guess one more thing, really briefly. I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit before. We do have, if you do want to get sessions set up with us individually, we do have a video at the end here. That's pretty much added on to our episode, which talks about how you can set up a college admissions consultation session. Um, and uh, and I guess Bree, do you have any final concluding remarks? Or...
I was just going to say, as a college admissions tutor, we can help you through the organizational process, the brainstorming, the writing itself, or even just if you need someone to peer review your papers, that is absolutely something we can get done in a session or over a few sessions.
Food sessions. So yeah, and I will add that these are also free at this time. So we are not charging any money for anything. It is a very open-ended service. I guess with all of that, I guess we can conclude this episode today. Again, thank you, Bree, for your time today. And we again have a few more episodes in the lineup, I believe, for this series. I think our next episode will sort of go over like either it's going to go over letters of recommendation or even the awards and activities section. So stay tuned for that next episode. But yeah, so if we do appreciate you all joining us today, and we do look forward to seeing you all in our next episode.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to GSE. We are glad that you have chosen us to best assist you in your academic needs. This video will cover the steps to set up a one-on-one virtual tutoring session with one of our skilled tutors. First, start by visiting the GSE website, thegsecorp.org. Next, scroll down and click on the Learn More button under the VOT Institute panel. Clicking the Learn More button will direct you to the virtual outreach tutoring page on our website. Upon reaching this page, scroll down and click on the Students button. You will now be directed to complete the one-on-one student registration form. If you have a preference to get assistance from a specific tutor, please click the Our Tutor Team button to see a list of our different tutors and their respective academic specialties. Near the end of the one-on-one student registration form, you will be asked to set up an appointment with a virtual tutor. When you click the Schedule the Appointment link, you will be directed to a scheduling page where you will set up an appointment with a tutor. Do not close the student registration form. After setting up your appointment, you will need to return to the student registration form and click the Confirm option button to show that you have scheduled your appointment. Finally, submit the student registration form and check your email for confirmation. Congratulations! You have successfully set up your virtual tutoring session. If you encounter any difficulties throughout this process, please do not hesitate to contact the GSE Technical Helpline at 516-331-1606 or send an email to us at tutors@thegsecorp.org.